to you. One of the things we talked about yesterday and a lot today is this whole notion of, do we start with the bottom-up or the top-down approach? Do we try to change people's, actually, maybe a more accurate way to put it is, do we use our policies, our strategies, our programs, our tactics to try to change the individuals that we're trying to influence and their values and their attitudes? In other words, if I'm going to have a conversation with Joyce about issues related to science and maybe a power structure that exists between us, are the various programs through Advance and your other initiatives, should they be intended to make it so that I'm more likely to be respectful and have a set of values that respects Joyce as a researcher and as a woman and as a scientist? Or should we use the policy process with the understanding that you can't often change human nature? And instead, we have to build a wall so that no matter how I feel about Joyce, I can't hurt her. I can't harm her. The policies are in place to protect Joyce from being harmed by me or by the system. Now, how does that play out? We've heard all about it. Take the example of the blind peer review process. The blind peer review process, not knowing whether the author of the article is a man or a woman, that's a policy not designed to make me a better person as a reviewer and say, wow, it doesn't matter whether this person is a man or a woman, all that matters is the science. No, that policy is intended to create a wall that protects the scientist from my biases. It's the same way, many of you have heard this example of I think it was the New York Symphony Orchestra. The challenge over many years of only having a small percentage of female performers. And so how did they deal with it? I mean, new performers were invited to join the orchestra by a jury of existing performers. And the jury would sit there and they'd listen to the men and women come in and perform. And as was often the case, as in science as well, the men got the slots and the women didn't. So they put a curtain up so that you couldn't see who was performing. And they put carpeting so you couldn't hear whether the person had high heels or not. And then when they walked in and performed, it was about 50-50. When they built the wall to protect the performer against the bias of the judge. So I want to use an example of a study that we're doing at the National Academy of Sciences. It's about 6 months old. Shirley, you alluded to this yesterday. We're trying to determine the effects of sexual harassment. You can scrap this. I'm not going to use the PowerPoint, so you can turn that off. The effects of sexual harassment on women's career choices, and what policies need to be put in place, and what strategies work, and what kind of training works to both make sure that men and women are less likely to harass others in the lab, in the classroom, on the field set, out on the field, in the research vessel, out in the oceans. Also, to help women feel more empowered to challenge sexual harassers, but also to create a system where if I feel like being a harasser, if I am a harasser, it's more difficult for me to be a harasser, and I'm more likely to be penalized for it. So again, using the policies and strategies and programs to both make me a better person so I'm less likely to harass, and create a mechanism by which the potential victims are prevented from me harassing them. Does that make sense, that dichotomy I've set up? So let me first of all illustrate a couple ways, a couple things we're struggling with actually with this study. One of which is, what is sexual harassment? So if Rafaela and I are having a conversation and she says as a new faculty member, wow, I'm really struggling as an new assistant professor here. And I say, well, you know, what am I supposed to do about it? Well, can you be supportive And I might say, I could, but you don't belong in the lab in the first place. Now, is that sexual harassment? Or okay, maybe not. I mean, you can judge for yourself. If I were to say, actually, I love having you in the lab, and in fact, I've taken a poll of all the men, and they love having you in the lab.
That's even worse.
Is that sexual harassment? Might be. Might be. Or if I come and I tell an explicit, a dirty joke to the three of you here, and you laugh, and you laugh, and you laugh, and I laugh, but the reason you laugh is because you're worried how I'm going to react if you don't laugh. Is that sexual harassment? Or if you laugh, and you laugh, and you laugh, and I laugh at the joke, but the reason you laughed is not because of me, but because your boss laughed and you were worried about, you don't even know me, but you're worried how your boss might react. Is that sexual harassment? Or if you laugh, you laugh, you laugh, I laugh, and the reason you laughed is you thought it was funny. Plain and simple. Is that sexual harassment? I mean, these are tough issues, and these are issues we have to deal with. And it might even be, thank you for, may I have a round of applause for my colleague here. Thank you. It may even be, you could take it a step further. One of the questions we're struggling with is if a graduate student decides to go on a date, consensual relationship with a professor, is that sexual harassment? So I haven't raised these with any answers in mind. I'd love to hear what you all think. But think about it in the context of what do we then do about it? How do we prevent a culture being developed within the department or on the campus where the reason you laugh, Rafaela, is because you're worried about how I feel versus you think it's a funny joke? Or should I even be telling the joke regardless of who laughs? In other words, it's like, did a tree fall in the forest if no one heard it? Was it a sexual harassment situation if none of the four people thought it was sexual harassment? But could it still be a culture in which there was the potential for harm to other people in the community? So you see the layers of complexity here. So I want to open this up. I'd love for this to be a conversation about these two core issues. Where do we put our dollar, our candy? Do we put it in policies that try to change my values and my behavior? Or do we put it into creating structures that regardless of what my values are, I can't hurt anybody, or it's less likely that I can? And then think about it in terms of this sexual harassment issue. What do we do to create a climate that is healthier? And what do we do so that I'm less likely to be a harasser? But what must we also do, or what's more important, when you weigh that against creating a system that protects people from one another? A final thought, and then I'll open this up. I met a new department chair of I think it was biochemistry, about a month ago from a major US university. And he said his first day on the job, 8 o'clock, he walked in, and he had these visions of how he could transform his department into one of the leading research entities in the world and really transform the field of biochemistry. And by the end of the day, the first day on the job, he said to himself, I'm afraid I'm going to have to spend most of my time protecting my faculty from hurting each other for the rest of my career. And how discouraging that must have been for him. Now, that may be an extreme case, but again, where would you put your money if you were that department chair? Would you be trying to change people's values and attitudes and behaviors? Or would you be trying to protect people from one another through structures, rules, regulations, policies, and procedures? And these are decisions that you all may have to make now, and people have to make every day. And it's directly relevant, I think, to our 2 days of conversation. So we have a comment. Thank you. Please.
I would say that
try to persuade people, that means that it denormalizes behavior. And so if you're going to shift the position of the discussion by saying, no, you can't say that, no, you can't do that, that is wrong, then I think people start to see it through the lens of other people who they're not.
So let me just be clear, and let's put it in terms of today's exercise. How many pieces of candy do you have?
I have 3.
How many would you put in the big policy protection box and one in changing people's behaviors? Interesting. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Yeşim Darıcı from Florida International University in Miami. I'm a physics professor, and for more than 30 years, so seen it all, lived it all, know it all. So my vote would be for both. I mean, we have to protect, build a wall, and also change people's attitudes and do it today. Now at FIU, what we are doing is bystander intervention. When you see something or a joke telling, whatever, we want everybody to be aware, first step, that there's something wrong there. Mm-hmm. Then we are training people to intervene, do something. I mean, I will do something, you may do, depends on your personality and what you have to lose, gain. So we are exploring a lot of ways how one can intervene, but not let it go. You may not want to intervene right there, later, this, that, but no, it has to stop. And somebody has to do something. So we are training people every day, and hopefully the culture will change, or they will shut up.
So you'd put your
their offices locked up.
Would you put your funding in 50-50 roughly? Let me ask you 2 questions. We met yesterday and we talked about Florida International. Have you been investing roughly, I know it's hard to break it down, roughly 50-50 now? 50% in policy change, 50% in changing people?
We are mostly into changing people now. Policies come.
How many physics professors are women in Florida International today?
I was the only one for 15 years or so. Now we have an astronomer and medical physicist.
So you've gone from 1 to 3. Okay. One of the things, yes, please.
Sorry, I have a question, because the thing is the options we're being given is putting our candy half in creating the wall and half in changing the people.
Right.
But there's a third possibility, which we've discussed, which is educating people before you need to change them.
Right.
So if you address the issue early on, like today with, I don't know, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, by the time they're 50, you won't need to change them. Yes. So, I'm quite in agreement with Jennifer Love. I would put most of my money in the wall, because the truth is that you're only building the wall for the next 30 years or so, at which point in 30 years, the people who you needed to change the behavior of are all gone, retired and done, and all the ones who are in the age of being a problem are no longer a problem because you've educated them correctly.
Right. So let me agree with you. You're absolutely right. We need the systemic structure that starts early, but is also outside of our sphere of influence. Because I'm asking you to take your candy today as your role today, as a department chair, a dean, a researcher. You have to take me as I come to you, and not say 30 years from now things will be better. So I completely understand. But I actually then go back to the bigger challenge. We've been investing certain ways over the past 20 years. Are we comfortable with the results we have gotten? Are you comfortable with 1 physics professor to 3? Are you comfortable with maybe by what was the first presentation, one of those this morning, we may be up to 28% women.
It's 29%.
29% by the year 2050. Are we comfortable with that? Because then let's just keep investing the way we have been, and we're going to get to where everyone's satisfied. Or are we going to try to accelerate things so that my daughter, who is 24, will still benefit even before we educate the masses? Right. Please, yes. And this builds a lot, actually, on your presentation from right before lunch. Thank you.
I really appreciate your last comments about, are we satisfied with the current state? And when I think about the amount of resources that my university spends at the wall, it's tremendous. If you think about your academic senates and all the subcommittees of faculty senate, there's hundreds of people spending at least an hour a week, if not more, on trying to strategize ways to stop people from hurting each other. Mm-hmm. We do that all the time.
Yeah.
And in the end state where we're at right now, and when you compare that with what we spend on developing our organization, it's incomparable.
Yeah. But then the alternative is, I've thought about this a lot. Not that I have any answers, but I can argue both sides.
I can too.
The problem is if you say we got to stop just building the wall and protecting people, we've got to work on changing people's values and attitudes. I remember a presentation at AAAS, Shirley, by Joe Handelsman, who was a key administrator in the Obama administration. And I think she's the one who said that when you try to educate people through training to reduce their implicit bias in peer review process again, oftentimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it does work if it's really good training. It works for one day. If you get trained today and you review tomorrow, you do well. If you get trained today and review next week, you have the same biases. So changing people's values is tough, but I agree with you. Yeah. We spend so much time, money, and energy on building these protections. Right. That's frustrating as well.
And faculty get really good at policy.
They do.
That's because we do it all the time. If we always developed our organization, we get really good at that.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. That's hard work.
It's hard work.
Yeah.
So we have 5 more minutes for our conversation, but I want you to vote. You have to vote early. This is like my hometown of Chicago. You vote early and often. So William and his colleague are going to pass out 2 boxes. Again, you can keep your candy. Here are your choices. Keep your candy. Put some or all of your candy in the brown box, which is the policy piece. Put some or all of your candy, thank you, policy, in the bag, which is changing people's values. Changing people, focusing on people. So please do that while we have our last 5 minutes of comments and questions. Yes, ma'am.
I think about corporations that were sued for sexual harassment in the 70s and the 80s. And corporations invested in change and people and training. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, after they'd lost millions and been sued for millions and lost on sexual harassment, they said, okay, these are the rules of the organization if you want to work here. And if you can't adhere to the rules, then you can't work here.
Yeah.
So I don't know if instead of investing 30 years in programs that were pipeline for STEM and to retain women in engineering and hire more faculty that are diverse, if we would have ended up in a different place than if we would have said, okay, these are the rules of the game, we just changed it.
That's
so maybe it's time to try it the other way.
It's a fascinating observation. Yes, please. I know it's a little disruptive to be voting and speaking at the same time. Please. Do we have a microphone? Here we go. I told you it'd be a little chaotic. I hope you don't mind.
No, it's fine. Well, I'm not giving my candy away because...
You gave your candy away. What a benevolent administrator you are.
I don't think you can change a person's value a lot. I do think you can change a group value and clearly define group values, and through clearly defining and having leadership in that respect, you can make sure that you create an environment where everybody feels at home, no matter where they come from. And so I'm not going to put it in either box.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's reflecting what I think would be the way to go.
That's fair enough, although you're still saying that you're going to try to create a system where no matter how I feel and what my values are, I will not take the chance of doing anything that might offend you. I will be civil toward you. Versus saying to me and giving me training that says, this person is a brilliant scientist, this person is a brilliant leader, I need to respect her and accept her as she is. And in fact, I do feel that way.
Yeah, but it's not about building a system that's creating walls. It's actually about a system that's breaking down walls and is showing mutual respect to one another.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Candace Foley. I'm from Suffolk County Community College on Long Island, and I'm also having trouble with the either-or choice here because I deal with programs that mentor young women from many stages. They go through undergraduate, the graduate school, they go to postdoc, and we have our postdoc students who are dealing with the same issues and then into workforce that we're trying to educate the 18 to 22-year-old market with as well. So our goal is, you can make a law, you can build a wall, things will still happen. So what we're looking to do is to educate the young women in STEM as to what their options are and to make them more resilient and empower them with knowledge so that if and or when these things happen to them, they're capable of dealing with it and that they know their options instead of falling into a pitfall of having to laugh at a joke they don't like. In other words, they sometimes are not aware in their own mind, of things that are enacted to protect them, regardless of what stage of their career they're in.
Right. Thank you for these last two comments, and they are the last two comments. I do want to say this was artificially staged, of course. I was forcing you to make two choices, not many. But it's a way that we need to think about these things because, let's face it, we face the issue of scarce resources. And as faculty, deans, department chairs, managers, we can only invest so much of our time, energy, and money into certain things. Where are we going to get the biggest bang for the buck? We didn't solve anything, but I hope it gave us an opportunity to take just a couple minutes to reflect on how we would react to the challenges, and we do react to the challenges we've been hearing about and we'll hear about later today. So thank you for letting us deviate from the prepared script and have a little fun and even eat a little sweets. Thank you all. Thank you.